Hi, welcome to Self-Regulation, a webinar for the Practitioner course, presented by me, Tara Graves. The objectives are as follows: to look at the 21st century dimension of self-regulation more in depth, and to explore examples of what each competency looks like at the classroom level. So you should be familiar with this. It's our 21st Century Competencies Guide, and this is useful when planning instruction. We're looking at the self-regulation elevator in this webinar, and you are probably familiar with how this works. So starting at the bottom, we take a look at what is self-regulation, and then each of the floors, starting here, builds on the one previous to it. So the criteria, or what we call the competencies, are located here. So why should students self-regulate? Taking responsibility for one's work, ongoing learning, and life goals is an important competency in a world where individuals work both independently and in teams. Individuals who possess the metacognitive ability to monitor their own work, seek and accept critical feedback from multiple sources, and strive to improve their work products are more likely to succeed in the 21st century world of college and careers. What is self-regulation? Self-regulation involves a range of thinking and learning skills that students develop over time that are strongly related to the ability to produce quality work products in a timely manner. Planning and monitoring the progress and quality of work and to seek input where needed are key competencies in the 21st century because people increasingly are being expected to work with limited supervision and to function in non-routine situations without constant direction. The ability to plan and carry out work is highly correlated to the capacity to self-regulate. Students who develop self-regulation skills will be more successful at individual work and in working as part of a team. Self-regulation skills are also prerequisite to the development of leadership abilities due to an emphasis on planning for future success, along with the adapting processes and projects based on the changing realities of a given situation, and the importance of appropriately seeking and managing input and feedback from multiple sources. So how do you go about planning instruction that includes opportunities for self-regulation? In traditional classrooms, instruction is planned, paced, and structured, usually by the teacher. While this is often necessary, such instruction does not provide opportunities for students to develop self-regulation skills. The goal of developing student self-regulation skills should be to move the locus of control for learning processes from the teacher to the student. Initially, this likely will require explicit guidance and substantial scaffolding. But as students begin to develop the ability to regulate their own work, it will become possible to progressively give students more responsibility for learning processes, tasks, and projects. Keep in mind a few possible approaches to developing learning activities that foster self-regulation. Consider creating learning opportunities that are less well-defined for students than traditional lessons. Provide more time for students to complete the activity. Allow more scope for failure, and that's an important one, and subsequent iterative revisions. And provide broad learning goals and success criteria, not specific learning targets. As students are engaging in learning activities designed to develop self-regulation, consider looking for opportunities not to intervene. Instead, consider guiding students to the success criteria, asking them to determine their own course of action, steering them to alternative sources of information, such as other students or resources outside the classroom, and frequently encouraging students to seek and act on feedback about their work. As learning activities reach higher levels of the self-regulation elevator, students have more opportunities to practice self-regulation skills. Let's explore each level in more detail. As you look at the images here, the first one is funny because it's such a contradiction of what we want and what we model. So this is the change we're looking for. If you see to the right, the teacher-centered learning, what the structure looks like, and then what student-centered learning looks like. It's really what the goal is. So one of the competencies for self-regulation is that learning activities are long-term. They're long-term when they have sufficient time to plan the process of their work and carry out that process to a conclusion. A single class period would rarely, if ever, be sufficient to be considered long-term. Learning goals define what will be learned and help students place this learning in the context of prior learning. And the success criteria, for example, could be a rubric, provides students with a framework for planning their activities to achieve a particular outcome. Key considerations. Content learning is an essential component of any learning. The focus here, however, is on students' development of the ability to conduct work over a period of time. It is therefore important to focus on both content and process when developing students' self-regulation skills. Learning goals and success criteria need to not be predetermined by the teacher, especially once students see how having access to learning goals and success criteria can help them own their learning. Students might be allowed to create their own goals and criteria at the outset of a learning activity. Students likely will need substantial scaffolding relating to their use of time and the process of effectively planning their work. Gradually releasing these responsibilities to students is highly recommended. When planning, consider the potential for creating more long-term assignments to allow for more self-regulation. Let's take a look at an example learning activity. Students write a persuasive essay, working on it over several class periods. So that gives you a good example of how it's long-term. It's not just for one class period. The next competency, so the next floor up on our elevator, is planning their own work. Students who plan their own work are given the flexibility to make substantive decisions about the schedule and steps they will follow to accomplish a task. Key considerations. Decisions students make should be about substantive issues of schedule and process, not just surface level issues. When planning their work, students may decide how they're going to do something by breaking down a complex task into simpler subtasks and by choosing the tools they will use. They may decide when by creating a schedule for their work, including final and interim deadlines. They may decide who by determining how to divide the work among several students. And they may decide where by outlining which pieces of work should be done in or out of school, especially thinking about if they have technology. So if they have technology at school but not at home, they'll have to figure that out as part of their plan. Students should be encouraged to monitor their work by regularly examining their progress and the quality of their work as they do it. Having learning goals and success criteria up front helps students to gauge their progress toward a desired end. So let's take a look at our example and see how adding the planning of their own work to this changes the activity. If students help create a rubric for a persuasive essay assignment and given the due date for the final draft, they must plan the steps of their writing process with interim due dates. Okay, so just change just a little bit. They help create the rubric, and then taking a look at their due date, they have to plan their steps. And let's look at our final competency. Revise based on feedback. Students have the opportunity to revise their work based on feedback when feedback is given and explicitly used to improve the work before it is submitted or finalized. Feedback may come from the educator or from peers. Students might also have the opportunity to revise their work based on their own deliberate process of self-reflection. Feedback can be one of the most significant influences on improving learning. Effective feedback helps students to address the gap between current performance and performance goals. It is more than simple praise. Comments such as good job or great work do little to help the student understand what constitutes great work. Effective feedback tells the student specifically what he or she is doing well and offers specific guidance to help move their learning forward. Is directly connected to the learning goals and success criteria, helps the student to be more aware of progress along a learning path, and also leads to reflection and planning of next steps. Remember, to qualify as planning and monitoring their work, the learning activity must also meet the requirements for the long-term activity with goals and success criteria in advance. So let's take a look at how our example has changed from the beginning. So first they're just asked to write an essay over several periods, several class periods. Then they help create the rubric with the due date in mind. And then let's see how this has changed just a little bit more. They're creating a rubric for persuasive essay assignment and given the due date for the final draft. They must plan the steps of their writing process with interim due dates, which include opportunities for feedback and revision. So making sure that part of the planning process includes that feedback and revision time. Final thoughts on self-regulation. Take a look at this little cartoon here. This is exactly what I think we're going for. Both students there are basically putting a little model plane together. The girl is looking at her instructions there, step 1, step 2, and so on, and the boy is just picturing what the final product looks like. And this is what we want students to do. We want them to be able to figure out how to get to that final product in whichever way works for them. Self-regulation is one of the most in-demand abilities for individuals entering a workplace. In fact, the Nevada State Board of Education's 2014 Employability Skills for Career Readiness Standards identifies 21 performance standards, 2/3 of which involve the ability to self-regulate. Students who are able to take responsible control of their work through effective planning and monitoring, and by seeking input regarding the work's progress and quality, are displaying an ability to self-regulate. As learning activities climb the self-regulation elevator, students will definitely get more practice working with these competencies. This is not an easy task for teachers. They have to give up some control, and our students also are not really ready, for the most part, to be able to plan all aspects of their work. The time invested, however, in strengthening these competencies will pay off for all parties in the long run. Teachers won't have to spell things out all the time, and students will really be more engaged and take ownership of their learning process. It may be helpful for you to take a look at the Self-Regulation Elevator Guide linked here. It is basically the transcript of this webinar in addition to concrete examples of learning activities for each competency. Thank you.